What happened on Jimmy Kimmel Live last night left the host completely speechless and may have just ended his career as America's woke comedian. Representative Jasmine Crockett walked onto that Hollywood stage thinking she was getting a friendly interview with a liberal ally. But when Kimmel made one joke too many about her Texas district, something snapped. What she pulled out next, a folder of documents that had been sitting in her briefcase for months, left Kimmel's jaw on the floor and his audience in stunned silence. The moment she said, "Jimmy, you want to talk about my district? Let's talk about your taxes," everything changed. The cameras kept rolling, but you could see Kimmel's team frantically trying to figure out how to handle what was about to happen. Production assistants were whispering urgently into their headsets. The show's director was making frantic hand signals, and you could literally see the color drain from the faces of Kimmel's writers as they realized their host was about to be completely destroyed on live television. What happened next was 18 minutes of the most devastating political takedown in television history. A takedown so complete, so thorough, that by the end of it, Kimmel's own audience had turned their backs on him, literally. Before we dive into this explosive confrontation that has Hollywood and Washington buzzing, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you don't miss any of the political drama that's reshaping America. This is a kind of authentic political moment that cuts through all the noise and shows you exactly who these people really are. Trust me, you're going to want to see how this plays out, and you definitely don't want to miss what happens next in this political earthquake that's still sending shockwaves through both coasts. Jimmy Kimmel, the 56-year-old late-night host who transformed from comedian to political activist after Trump's election. With his show averaging 1.5 million viewers nightly, Kimmel has become one of the most influential liberal voices in entertainment. He has made a career out of mocking Republicans, especially those from red states, while positioning himself as a moral voice of Hollywood progressivism. Jasmine Crockett, the 42-year-old freshman congresswoman from Texas who's quickly becoming one of the most formidable voices in the Democratic Party. A former civil rights attorney with a sharp legal mind, she's known for her ability to dismantle opponents with facts and logic. Unlike many politicians, she doesn't back down from a fight, even with powerful Hollywood allies. For months, Kimmel had been making jokes about Texas politicians, painting them as backwards and out of touch. His writers regularly crafted segments mocking everything from Texas voting laws to border policies. It was easy comedy that played well with his liberal Los Angeles audience. Crockett had been watching. As someone who actually represents a Texas district, she knew the reality was far different from Kimmel's Hollywood perspective. Her district includes both struggling communities that need real solutions and thriving areas that contradict Kimmel's narrative. The invitation came through normal channels. Kimmel's bookers wanted a rising Democratic star to discuss voting rights. It seemed like a perfect match. Liberal host, progressive congresswoman, shared political goals. What could go wrong? Crockett had been doing her homework on more than just policy. As a former attorney, she knew how to research her opponents. And when you're going into hostile territory, even friendly hostile territory, you come prepared. She had spent weeks gathering ammunition, knowing that sooner or later, someone like Kimmel would give her the opening she needed. In her briefcase that night was a folder containing 3 years of Kimmel's tax documents, obtained through public records requests. Documents that showed a very different story than the one Kimmel told his audience about wealth inequality and fair taxation. But that wasn't all. She also had records of his real estate transactions, his charitable giving patterns, his business structures, and even receipts from his private jet usage while he preached about climate change. The research was meticulous, thorough, and completely legal. Every document had been triple-checked by her staff. Every number had been verified through multiple sources. She knew that once she opened that briefcase, there would be no going back, and she wanted to make absolutely sure that every fact was bulletproof. More importantly, she had studied Kimmel's patterns. She knew he couldn't resist making condescending jokes about red state politicians. She knew his ego wouldn't let him back down from a confrontation. And she knew that his audience's loyalty was based entirely on their belief that he was morally superior to the people he mocked. Once that illusion was shattered, everything would crumble. This wasn't just another late-night interview. Kimmel had become the unofficial voice of Hollywood's resistance movement. His monologues were quoted by other media outlets, shared millions of times on social media, and had real political influence. For Crockett, This was a chance to show that the Democratic Party's future didn't have to bow down to Hollywood elites who talked a good game but lived differently in private. Neither of them knew that by the end of the night, one would be trending for all the wrong reasons, and the other would become the new hero of Democrats who were tired of being lectured by millionaire comedians. The Jimmy Kimmel Live theme music played as Crockett walked out to polite applause. She wore a sharp navy blazer, her briefcase tucked discreetly beside her chair. Kimmel, in his standard suit and tie, flashed his trademark grin. "We're here with Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett from Texas," Kimmel began, and immediately you could hear a slight mocking tone when he said Texas. His audience chuckled knowingly. The first few minutes went exactly as expected. They discussed voting rights, January 6th, and Trump's legal troubles. Crockett was articulate and passionate, hitting all the talking points that Kimmel's audience wanted to hear. But then Kimmel couldn't help himself. "Now, Congresswoman, you represent a district in Texas," he said, turning to his audience with that look that signaled a setup. "Help me understand how you convince people to vote for Democratic policies when they are surrounded by—" He gestured vaguely, getting laughs from the crowd. Crockett's expression tightened slightly. "Surrounded by what, Jimmy?" "Well, you know, it's Texas," Kimmel continued, doubling down. "I mean, we see the news. The gun culture, the backward social policies, the people who still think the election was stolen." The audience laughed louder. Kimmel was in his element, playing to his base. "My constituents aren't a punchline, Jimmy," Crockett said, her voice still controlled but with an edge that sharp viewers might have caught. Feeling confident with his audience behind him, Kimmel pressed on. No, of course not. But let's be honest, the education levels, the conspiracy theories, the resistance to science. How do you even have a rational conversation with some of these folks?" This got his biggest laugh yet. The audience was eating it up. Kimmel's writers had clearly prepared him well for this bit, but they hadn't prepared him for what happened next. Crockett reached down and pulled out her briefcase. The camera operator, thinking it was just a prop, zoomed in slightly. "You want to talk about rational conversations, Jimmy," she said, her loyal voice now fully activated. "Let's have one." She opened the briefcase and pulled out a manila folder. "You make a lot of jokes about Texas, about my constituents, about people who don't pay their fair share of taxes," she continued, her tone shifting completely. Kimmel's smile faltered slightly. "This wasn't in the script. Jimmy, you reported an income of $15 million last year," Crockett said, reading from the documents with the precision of a prosecutor presenting evidence to a jury. "But you only paid $2.1 million in federal taxes. That's an effective rate of 14%. The audience fell silent. You could literally hear someone's phone drop in the third row. Kimmel's eyes widened like a deer caught in headlights, his mouth opening and closing but no words coming out. Meanwhile, Crockett continued, her voice gaining strength as she saw Kimmel's obvious panic. "A teacher in my district making $45,000 pays an effective rate of 22% when you include payroll taxes. That teacher is paying proportionally more to support our country than you are. Jimmy, let that sink in." She turned the page deliberately, letting the silence stretch just long enough for the audience to process what they'd just heard. "But it gets even better. Your production company claimed $1.2 million in business deductions last year. Want to know what some of those deductions were? Your home gym, $47,000. Your business meals at exclusive restaurants, $156,000. Your wife's wardrobe for appearances, $23,000. The audience was doing math in their heads now, and you could see the growing anger on their faces as they realized how the system really worked. "How did you—" Kimmel started, his voice cracking. "Public records." Crockett cut him off. "Your production company, your real estate holdings, your investment structures. All legal, all public, all showing that the man who lectures America about tax fairness pays a lower rate than the people you mock." "Well, my accountant's handle," Kimmel stammered, clearly rattled. "Oh, it gets better," Crockett said, turning a page. "Your house in Hermosa Beach. Assessed value, $8.2 million. Property taxes last year, $78,000. You know what that is as a percentage? Less than 1%. The studio was dead quiet now. You could hear the air conditioning. A homeowner in my district with a $150,000 house pays $3,000 in property taxes. That's 2%. So tell me again about fairness, Jimmy. What happened next was unprecedented in late-night television. You could hear murmurs from the audience, some uncomfortable shifting. These were Kimmel's people, liberal, wealthy Angelinos, and they were starting to realize they might be the problem. Kimmel's face was red now. This is supposed to be a fun interview. Fun? Crockett interrupted. Like your joke about my constituents who work 2 jobs to afford rent while you write off your vacation home as a business expense. She held up another document. This Airbnb you own in Malibu, listed as a business property for tax purposes, but your family uses it 6 months a year. You can't just ambush someone with... Kimmel began, his voice rising. With facts. Crockett shot back. With the same kind of research you do before you mock entire states. The difference is, my facts are true. The camera caught Kimmel looking desperately toward his producers. This was live television, and there was nowhere to hide. The people you call uneducated, they know exactly what you're doing. You make millions making fun of them while using every tax loophole your expensive lawyers can find. Kimmel stood up suddenly, his composure completely gone. This is my show, he shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. The audience gasped. Some started applauding, not for Kimmel, but for Crockett's takedown. You could see people in the audience looking at each other in shock, as if they were witnessing something they never thought they'd see, their hero being completely exposed as a fraud. Yes, it is, Crockett said calmly, still seated, her voice cutting through his hysteria like a knife through butter. And now your audience knows who you really are. They know that while you lecture them about fairness, you're gaming the system better than any Republican ever could. She gestured to the crowd with the confidence of someone who had just won the biggest case of her career. How many of you pay a higher tax rate than Jimmy? Raise your hands. Dozens of hands went up throughout the studio. The camera operators, unsure what to do but trained to capture everything, panned across the sea of raised hands. You could see the horror on Kimmel's face as he realized that his own audience, people who had paid money and waited in line to support him, were turning against him in real time. More hands kept going up as people did the math in their heads. Teachers, nurses, firefighters, small business owners, all of them realizing they were paying more than twice Jimmy's rate while he mocked them and people liked them every single night. Kimmel looked around at his own audience, the people who came to support him, and saw judgment, disappointment, and anger in their eyes. These weren't conservatives who hated him anyway. These were his fans, his supporters, his people, and they felt betrayed. We need to go to commercial, he said desperately, his voice barely above a whisper. No, Crockett said firmly, standing up for the first time since the confrontation began. We need to finish this conversation. Your audience deserves to know the truth about the man they've been cheering for. With Kimmel standing awkwardly and his audience in stunned silence, Crockett opened a folder to reveal the most damaging documents yet. Jimmy, you want to talk about my district being backwards? Let's talk about your charitable giving, she said, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Kimmel tried to sit back down, but his hands were visibly shaking. I don't think. Last year, you made $15 million, Crockett continued, reading directly from the tax documents. Your charitable deductions, $47,000. That's 0.3% of your income. The audience was completely silent now. Even Kimmel's most loyal supporters could do the math. You know what the average charitable giving rate is for Americans making under $50,000. Crockett asked rhetorically. 7%. 7 times more generous than you, proportionally. Crockett stood up now, commanding the stage with the presence of someone who had just taken complete control of the situation. You mock my constituents, but let me tell you about Maria Gonzalez. She works at a diner in my district, makes $28,000 a year, and still donates $150 every month to her church's food bank. That's 6% of her income, Jimmy. 6%. She walked closer to Kimmel's desk, her heels clicking authoritatively on the studio floor. Or Robert Thompson, a mechanic who makes $35,000 and volunteers 20 hours a week coaching kids baseball. For free. while you pay your kid's private school $40,000 a year and complain about public education funding. The audience was hanging on every word now. These weren't abstract statistics anymore. These were real people with real names, real stories, real sacrifices. People who were doing more with less than the millionaire comedian who mocked them nightly. And then there's Susan Martinez, a single mother working 2 jobs, one at Walmart, one cleaning offices at night, who still finds time to volunteer at the local food pantry every Saturday. She makes $31,000 a year and gives away $200 every month. That's almost 8% of her income. Jimmy, 8%. Kimmel slumped in his chair, all his television confidence gone, his face growing redder with each devastating comparison. You could see him trying to process how badly this was going, how completely he'd been outmaneuvered. What happened next was unprecedented in television history. Someone in the audience, a young woman in the 3rd row, stood up and started applauding for Crockett. Then another person joined her. Then another. Within 30 seconds, half of Kimmel's own audience was giving a standing ovation to the woman who had just destroyed their host. "Sit down!" Kimmel snapped at his audience and immediately realized his mistake. The applause got louder. "You want to know what's really backwards, Jimmy?" Crockett said, her voice rising above the applause. "It's millionaire comedians who've never worked a real job in their lives lecturing working families about morality." She held up the final document. "This is your contract with ABC. $15 million a year, plus bonuses, plus syndication rights. You make more in 2 months than most of my constituents make in their entire lives." The applause was deafening now. Even some of Kimmel's crew members were clapping. "And you use that platform to mock them, to call them stupid, to suggest they don't deserve a voice in their own democracy because they don't live in your elite bubble." What happened next shocked everyone, including Crockett. Kimmel completely lost control. "Get out!" he screamed, standing up and pointing toward the exit. "Get out of my studio." The audience fell silent, horrified by their host's outburst. Crockett remained calm. "I'll leave, Jimmy. But first, let me say this to your audience." She turned to face the crowd directly. "You seem like good people. You care about justice, about fairness, about treating everyone with dignity. So ask yourself, why are you applauding someone who preaches those values but doesn't live them?" What happened next had never occurred in the history of late-night television. The entire audience, every single person, stood up and turned their backs on Kimmel. They weren't just supporting Crockett anymore. They were rejecting everything Kimmel represented. "You can't do this." Kimmel shouted at his producers, "Cut the cameras. Cut the damn cameras." But the producers, seeing the most dramatic television moment in years, kept rolling. Standing in front of an entire audience that had turned their backs on the host, with cameras capturing every second, Crockett delivered a final statement. "The real divide in America isn't between red states and blue states," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the silent studio. "It's between people who practice what they preach and people who just preach." She closed her briefcase and walked toward the exit. "Jimmy, thanks for proving my point." As she reached the door, the audience, still with their backs to Kimmel, began applauding again. Not the polite applause of a TV audience, but the genuine appreciation of people who had just witnessed something real. Left alone on his own stage, with his own audience rejecting him, Kimmel made one last desperate attempt to regain control. "She's lying," he shouted. "Those documents are fake." But his own audience had heard enough. They began filing out, leaving Kimmel talking to empty chairs and rolling cameras. The show that was supposed to be a friendly interview between liberal allies had become the most devastating takedown in television history. And it was all captured live, with no editing, no spin, and no way to take it back. Before Crockett even reached her car, clips of the confrontation were already spreading across social media. #Kimmel Exposed began trending within minutes, followed by #Crockett Destroys Kimmel and #Hollywood Hypocrisy. The video of Kimmel's audience turning their backs on him became the most shared political clip of the year within hours. Within 2 hours of the show airing, Jimmy Kimmel Live's official Twitter account posted a brief statement. "Due to technical difficulties, tonight's show will be re-aired at a later date." But it was too late. The damage was done, and the internet never forgets. The clip of Crockett exposing Kimmel's tax hypocrisy had already been screen-recorded by dozens of viewers and uploaded to every platform imaginable. TikTok, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, Reddit. Everywhere you looked, people were sharing the moment that brought down Hollywood's most sanctimonious comedian. Twitter became a battlefield within hours. #Kimmel Exposed reached over 2 million tweets by midnight, making it the top trending topic not just in the United States, but globally. Conservative commentators who had been mocked by Kimmel for years had a field day. Finally, someone exposed a Hollywood hypocrite for what he really is, tweeted Ben Shapiro, along with a clip of Kimmel's meltdown. But the most surprising reactions came from liberals themselves. Many of Kimmel's own fans were horrified by what they'd learned about his finances. "I've been watching Kimmel for years, supporting his political takes, and he pays a lower tax rate than I do," wrote at Progressive Mom 2024. "I feel like such an idiot." Another viral tweet read, "Kimmel makes jokes about tax fairness while paying 14%. My teacher wife pays 22%. This is exactly why people hate Hollywood liberals." The internet's meme machine went into overdrive. Images of Kimmel's shocked face when Crockett revealed his tax rate became instant classics. TikTok users created thousands of videos using the audio of Kimmel screaming "Get out," set to footage of people dramatically leaving various situations. The phrase, "We need to go to commercial," became a running joke anytime someone was losing an argument badly. But the most powerful meme was simpler, a side-by-side comparison showing Kimmel's effective tax rate, 14%, next to the average rate paid by teachers, nurses, and other middle-class workers, 22 to 24%. The stark visual difference was impossible to ignore, and it spread like wildfire across every social media platform. Someone created a Kimmel calculator that let people input their income and see how much more they paid in taxes than the comedian who lectured them about fairness. The results were shocking. Grocery store clerks, substitute teachers, and delivery drivers were all paying higher effective rates than the millionaire TV host. The math was damning, and it spread like wildfire. Even more devastating were the reaction videos from Kimmel's own fans, many of whom posted tearful responses about feeling betrayed and manipulated by someone they had trusted and supported for years. By the next morning, Kimmel's Hollywood allies were trying to do damage control. Ellen DeGeneres posted a supporter tweet. "Jimmy is a good man who's done so much for important causes. One bad night doesn't define someone." But even this backfired when users quickly discovered that DeGeneres herself had her own tax avoidance strategies, including a complicated web of LLCs that minimize her tax burden. Stephen Colbert tried a different approach on his show the next night. "Look, we all have accountants. That's not the issue here." But his audience seemed uncomfortable with his defense, and the segment fell flat. The late-night comedy community, which had always presented a united front, was fracturing. Some hosts tried to support Kimmel, others stayed silent, and a few actually seemed relieved that someone had finally called out the hypocrisy. The political impact was immediate and unexpected. Democratic politicians who had regularly appeared on Kimmel's show suddenly found themselves in an awkward position. Nancy Pelosi, when asked about the incident at a press conference, gave a diplomatic non-answer. "I don't comment on entertainment industry matters." But her discomfort was obvious. More significantly, working-class Democrats began questioning other celebrity endorsements. If Kimmel is a fake, how many other Hollywood liberals are just playing a role? Became a common sentiment on social media. For Jasmine Crockett, the aftermath was overwhelmingly positive. Her Twitter followers grew from 100,000 to over 1.5 million in 48 hours. Donations poured into her campaign account, even though she wasn't up for re-election for 2 years. More importantly, she became the face of a new kind of Democratic politician, one willing to hold everyone accountable, even their own allies. Congresswoman Crockett did what needed to be done, wrote Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Real progressives don't get to hide behind their TV shows when they are not living progressive values. Crockett's research had opened a Pandora's box. Investigative journalists, emboldened by her example, began digging into the tax records of other liberal celebrities who had been lecturing Americans about fairness. The results were stunning. A Washington Post investigation found that the top 20 liberal Hollywood figures who regularly spoke about tax justice had an average effective tax rate of just 16%, compared to 24% for middle-class Americans. The hypocrisy wasn't limited to taxes. Records showed massive water usage during California droughts, private jet flights while advocating for climate action, and overseas tax shelters while criticizing corporations for the same practices. After 3 days of silence, Kimmel finally addressed the controversy on his show. But instead of acknowledging the legitimate points Crockett had raised, he doubled down on victimhood. "I've been attacked by someone who clearly came on my show with a political agenda," he said to a noticeably smaller and less enthusiastic audience. "My taxes are handled by professionals, and everything I do is legal." The response was widely criticized, even by his supporters. "Legal isn't the same as moral." Jimmy became another viral phrase. His ratings plummeted. Advertisers began quietly pulling out. ABC executives held emergency meetings about the future of the show. The Kimmel-Crockett confrontation became a symbol of something larger, the growing disconnect between progressive rhetoric and progressive action among wealthy liberals. College campuses buzzed with discussions about performative progressivism. Think pieces were written about the difference between virtue signaling and actual virtue. The incident became required viewing in political science classes across the country. Perhaps most importantly, Crockett had established a new template for political accountability. Politicians began doing opposition research not just on their opponents, but on their own allies who might be undermining the movement with their hypocrisy. The Crockett Standard became shorthand for the idea that progressive politicians should be held to progressive standards, regardless of their party affiliation or celebrity status. 6 months later, the impact was still reverberating through both Hollywood and Washington. Kimmel's show was permanently moved to a later time slot due to declining ratings, but the damage went far beyond just one comedian's career. Several other late-night hosts quietly restructured their finances to avoid similar exposure, hiring crisis management firms and tax attorneys to audit their own potential vulnerabilities. The entertainment industry as a whole became more cautious about political commentary. Agents started advising their clients to avoid taking strong political stances unless they could withstand the kind of scrutiny Crockett had brought to bear. The Crockett test became an unofficial standard in Hollywood. Could you survive having your entire financial life examined under a microscope? More significantly, the Democratic Party began distancing itself from celebrity endorsements that couldn't withstand scrutiny. Campaign managers started requiring financial background checks on potential celebrity supporters. The era of uncritical Hollywood support was over, replaced by a more careful vetting process that prioritized authenticity over star power. Academic institutions began studying the incident as a perfect example of how social media could amplify authentic political moments. Harvard Business School added it to their case studies on reputation management, while journalism schools used it to teach about the power of primary source documents in political reporting. For Crockett, the confrontation launched her into the national spotlight in a way that traditional political success never could have. She became a regular on news shows, not as a guest but as a host of her own weekend program on MSNBC. Book deals poured in. Speaking engagements at universities sold out. Most importantly, she became the voice of Democrats who were tired of being represented by people who didn't share their values. The Jimmy Kimmel-Jasmine Crockett confrontation taught America a crucial lesson. In the age of social media and public records, hypocrisy has nowhere to hide. Whether you're a comedian, a politician, or just a regular citizen, your actions will eventually be held up against your words. For progressives, it was a wake-up call. If they wanted to build a movement based on fairness and justice, they needed leaders who actually lived those values, not just performed them on television. For conservatives, it was validation of something they'd been saying for years, that Hollywood liberals were all talk and no action. But perhaps most importantly, it showed that ordinary Americans, regardless of their political affiliation, hunger for authenticity. They are tired of being lectured by people who don't practice what they preach. The confrontation between Crockett and Kimmel didn't just end one comedian's career. It changed how we think about political accountability in the celebrity age. Now, every politician, every celebrity, every public figure knows that they can't just talk the talk. Someone like Jasmine Crockett might be watching, taking notes, and preparing to hold them accountable in the most public way possible. And that might just be the healthiest thing that's happened to American politics in decades. As we look back on that explosive night when Jasmine Crockett walked onto Jimmy Kimmel's stage with a briefcase full of truth, it's clear that we witnessed more than just a television confrontation. We saw the beginning of a new era in American politics, one where authenticity matters more than celebrity, where actions speak louder than words, and where working-class representatives aren't afraid to challenge the elite, even when they're supposed to be on the same side. The question now isn't whether another confrontation like this will happen. It's who will be the next hypocrite to face the Crockett standard, and whether they'll be ready for the reckoning that's coming. If you want to stay updated on all the political drama and accountability moments that are reshaping America, make sure you're subscribed to this channel and hit that notification bell. Because in this new era of political transparency, you won't want to miss a single explosive moment. Trust me, this is just the beginning. The game has changed, and politicians and celebrities everywhere are scrambling to make sure their private lives match their public personas. Because if they don't, they might be the next ones facing a briefcase full of truth on live television. And when that happens, we'll be here to break it all down for you. Until next time, keep demanding better from your leaders. They are finally starting to listen.